stand for. And we've already done the food and the infection, which we did last week. Today is genetics, and next week we will cover the heavy metals, and the following week we'll do the hormones. So today we want to make sure that you understand that at the bottom of this slide, the limebook.com is there because this is an interactive website where a nurse and private investigator who herself has fought MS and Lyme and serious diseases is helping people talk to each other to learn how to implement some of the concepts that I present in these conversations. For those who can only do one thing, vitamin C is still perhaps applicable to more of the F and the I and the G and the H and the T than any other single nutrient, which is why we show you every time the idea that if you check with a little stick as in the right-hand corner bottom, if your stick stays in the dark green color, you are not going to get all of the full benefit that you can, but that applies also to getting enough D and other things. So we all need to pay attention then to all parts of the F.I.G.H.T. But because Dr. Andrew Weil has been nice enough to mention a case of a patient who has been spending an awful lot of money taking even steroids and constant antihistamines for chronic sinus, and he merely taught her how to lower the toxin load so that she found that she put a HEPA filter in the bedroom, and then she started to wash the sinuses with saline. We would recommend washing your sinuses with Quinton marine plasma isotonic, particularly if you add to it 50-50 the ACS advanced cellular silver, because chronic sinus is one problem that contributes then to lowering your overall health, because this is one of the areas of what we call foci of infection. So there's nothing wrong with learning from this slide, but it's terribly important to see that even doing all those things, unless she stayed off of the dairy products, she was not going to be able to remain off the drugs. So that ties into your consciousness the fact, then, that we have obviously large numbers of people who are lactose intolerant because they lack the enzyme lactase. So to an extent, and the genetics does influence our health, but the good news will come at the end of this presentation when you will find that you can offset the problem that not all of us are able to live on the wrong foods unless we do everything else right. And it would be cheaper to get off the wrong foods. And it turns out most of the American diet is called SAD, Standard American Diet, which means SAD, SAD diet. So genetics is the topic. Now, an easy piece of the puzzle is to teach you that certain toxic, like bisphenol A, have caused us to not methylate well. And what the heck, who cares about methylate? Well, methyl is CH3 group, and it's kind of like oxygen. It's not important until somebody's strangling you and you don't have air. If you don't have methylation groups, you cannot deal with the toxin loads that we all face. But because we have things in our diet, like bisphenol A, we have lost the capability of handling the need for methylation without what's in the bottom right-hand corner, 5'-methyl tetrahydrofolate. That is the active form of folic acid that is not in all of our supplements that have folic acid, the synthetic version, but only the 5'. The natural version can carry you to the optimal level of health that you would like to have if you are going to live to your maximum intended useful lifespan, which most agree today is 125 years, but we don't want to get there living the last 10 years in a nursing home, so we have to enjoy optimal health with no broken bones, so you need to have the soft arteries, hard bones, so you'll have to be on vitamin K2, which we call Beyond Bone. But there's so many pieces of this puzzle. So the New York Times in '07 had an article telling you that lots of people have got money and they're going to look at what can we learn from testing our genes, and whether we do it for $1,000 or the new price today to possibly do your entire genome they think they're going to start getting it down to 10,000. My point will be, as we go through the slides, that here's where the rubber meets the road. This slide from a week ago is telling you that if you have the genes that set your child up to have, say, for example, cystic fibrosis or any of these diseases like Fragile X, etc., they have always said, well, that's just important to know in case you plan to have a baby. Now they're saying, oh, no, wait a minute. If you carry these genes, you're at great risk as a woman, for example, to have a whole series of diseases that include ovarian failure, depression, anxiety, neurological problems from MS to Parkinson's. Now, wait a minute. All of these problems are things that I teach you with my F.I.G.H.T program are able to be addressed. So I need to make it very clear because people have got this so wrong. They don't understand, and women are still today learning that they have a BRCA gene, that's a breast cancer, in the family, and women are honestly still going to their doctors at Kaiser and they're actually thinking about removing both breasts. That is what I need to give you the education today to not take that incorrect action because a gene is able to only do something when it is expressed. And we can cause the expression of genes to be totally altered by helping you optimize everything you do with F.I.G.H.T. So therefore, we're going to learn a lot today because what we want to know is that in cancer, for example, we have today the ability to actually look at the tumor itself and learn a great deal about the uniqueness of each tumor. And that's quite important because it turns out that most people didn't realize that when they tell you that you have a brain tumor and that the average lifespan with that brain tumor is 6 months, or pancreatic cancer, colon cancer, whatever, you need to know that those averages are of no importance to you at all because some, if the average was 6 months, only lived 1 week, and some lived 5 years. You have to learn how to get into the 5-year group, and that will not happen without us empowering you to take personal responsibility for the environment that your body operates in, and that's what today's talk about genetics wants to help you with. We do know that there are all kinds of interesting problems showing up in pancreatic and brain tumors, and this is going to cause some interesting drug company to come up with something that's $10,000 a month to try to deal with that gene when you already have power that you didn't know about. And as we get down to some of the book covers, I'll be taking you into the anti-cancer book, A New Way of Life, in which I will show you a MD, PhD, doctor, researcher, scientist at a medical school that is by the name of David Servan-Schreiber, who's been able to show that whether it was pancreatic cancer or brain tumor, you can totally change the outcome. And his book, I think, is a landmark book called Anti-Cancer that will help you put the rest of the pieces that we're now showing you together. Duke University, Dr. Randy Jewell, is one of the people that has tied this story together. Epigenetics means above genetics. In a sense, it's more important than genetics because what we're saying here is that in genetics, if you spend all that money, $1,000 or $10,000, yeah, you're going to learn something. In the long run, we will be able to know more about how to optimize the diet that you will need over a lifetime, but we are not that far today. So much of gene testing is not so important when you look at what this is saying. This slide is telling you that the sequence of DNA does not have to be changed to still have a total permanent change in your offspring that can push you toward obesity and diabetes. This slide, Ghost in Your Genes, the upper right-hand corner tells you that you can find it on PBS, and it's a 1-hour documentary that will actually bring you into a new age that jumps beyond what many of your doctors are telling you and what most people are assuming. They think they know. Gee, if everybody in your family had diabetes, you're going to have diabetes. Everybody in your family had gastric carcinoma. That's not going to mean that you have gastric carcinoma. Let's make this clear. On my website, you go to Gordon Research and you put in the word cancer, and you will find a paper, The End of Cancer is Here, and that paper is by Kobayashi. Dr. Kobayashi was funded by the Sun Moon Church in Japan and was able to follow people for over 10 years, about 10,000 people, and show that many of the people in Japan have the gene for gastric carcinoma. It's very common to have stomach cancer there. But just because you have the gene didn't express. So what we're showing you here is that this is really fascinating to understand. First of all, when you learn that you can have identical twins and one will have autism and one will be doing extremely good at school, you'll learn that there's a lot more that we haven't yet plugged into our consciousness that gives you hope, that can empower you to do some of the exciting things that some of these books I will show you can take you into. So what we want to make clear here is that once the change in the gene has occurred, the nice lean brown mouse to the right-hand side of the group of mice is the agouti mouse. The other ones are those that have been exposed virtually to the same thing that you, if you were a mother and you warm the baby's formula in the microwave for 1 minute, and that particular cup that's holding the formula has plastic that is hardened with bisphenol A, that level of exposure was enough to cause all the offspring of this lean brown mice to continue to be diabetic, obese, and yellow. So it was a permanent change, and yet we didn't change the actual DNA structure. So this was above the genetics. So that makes genetics hard to study if there's something called epi, above genetic. Epi means above, that can actually explain some of this. So this is just to remind you that we do live in a day and age of wrapping, and we're all exposed to these Teflon. We have a lot of things coming into our body each day, and there are side effects for that. And David Ewan Duncan in this picture is actually an individual who was the poster boy for the National Geographic when they said, okay, you're a professor, you're in San Francisco, you're at a medical school, you're a researcher, scientific, let's test your blood and see how toxic you are. And he wound up getting interested enough that a book called Experimental Man has been written about what he learned when he actually went beyond the first test, because you can have your toxins measured at Mount Sinai School of Medicine for $5,000. But they went into it, spent $13,000 and did more. And then he got interested, and since then they've raised money and they've spent $500,000 testing this young man. And because he has a doctor at the University of California that treats him as an internist, the doctor checked him and said, you're very healthy, nothing unusual about you. You should live a long, long time. But when he got into the $500,000 of the studies, he found, wait a minute, my genes don't get rid of mercury in the normal 40 days. I take 180 days, so if I eat fish, I'm going to be more toxic than other people. And then he learned that he had some problems handling lipids that, in fact, could have taken him away at a much earlier age. So he learned that there was much more than what standard medicine in the best medical school under a competent internist really knew. So now we're down to the point that we have to see, well, what can we do if there's all these variables? How can we alter your daily environment? So on this slide, I say that methylation support has become vital, and specifically, I've made certain that the vitamin C that is offered by Longevity Plus, which is the most unusual vitamin C in the marketplace because of the fact that it is mixed with things like glycine and sulforamethane and ribose, etc. But in addition to that, it's been changed in a way that it's stomach-friendly, so you can take the same huge doses that Linus Pauling was taking, because Linus Pauling, as a Nobel Prize winner, knew that vitamin C, when it leaves your body in the urine, is not just giving you rich urine, it's carrying things out. So we add to your knowledge base On the bottom line here, MSM is in the vitamin C, as is TMG. But we get you the B12 and 5'-methyl tetrahydrofolate, MTHF, when you buy sublingual Beyond B12 and you take it under your tongue once a day. Amazing things happen because in our country, we have so many people that are having problems with their mental outlook. They're depressed. They have lots of issues, and we've been able to prove that the 5'-methyl tetrahydrofolate actually, as the natural form of folic acid, will work in people better than an antidepressant. And we've been able to show that if your doctor thinks you don't need B12, it's usually because he doesn't know the right test. Only MMA, methylmalonic acid testing, really tells you what's going on. The blood test for B12 is kind of useless, but the doctor doesn't know that unless he's one of the new doctors like Mark Hyman teaches this in the whole field of functional medicine. We teach these things. Now, if we're going to talk about nutrients, which we know that we're now in love with vitamin D, and I would like everybody on high levels of C, and even for a couple of days, I have people 3-4 days take high doses of A to fill the tank of A, which is quite low on many people today, to help you deal with issues. But minerals, where I came from owning a company called Mineral Lab and being medical director in offices in Tokyo, in offices in Amsterdam and Boston, San Francisco. I have a lot of experience in minerals, and we were measuring 41 minerals, so I know a lot about the bad guys, the cadmium, and the lead and the mercury, and I know a lot about the good guys, like the zinc and the magnesium, and we don't need the calcium you're all being told to take. Calcium should never be taken without equal amounts of magnesium, and calcium alone is not the answer to bone. Much more on that later, but beyond bone with vitamin K2 is where you want to be looking to deal with those issues. But this slide is up there to teach you that when we're talking genetics, it's quite interesting to know that the chromosome, which we know has about 100 million DNA base pairs, all of this is definitely tremendously influenced by the environment in which our cells operate, and I'm now making a very brief case here that none of us get enough rubidium or cesium, and even trace elements, ultra-trace like gold, are very useful unless you hear about quinton marine plasma, which in the isotonic form has some amazing things, because I mentioned when I talked about sinuses that we can rinse or flush our sinuses using a neti pot, but if we use quinton marine plasma, and particularly you add the ACS silver, now you're going to be able to deal with cases of chronic sinus allergy/infection. But now I'm moving you into another whole understanding. 100 years ago, quinton marine plasma was used in the treatment of children who were facing death with serious diseases, from leprosy to syphilis. But what we learned is that when we give the quinton marine plasma to the woman who is pregnant, we see a totally healthier child. We almost call them quinton babies. And I'm getting in here to the fact that when we are teaching about genetics, we have to look at the environment in which our cells are operating. And in my previous presentations and my F.I.G.H.T webinar, which I hope you review on my website, we've made it clear that we all are operating with a lot of toxins. So if you have to operate with a lot of bad stuff, I got to put good stuff into you. Now, there's another way of thinking about all of that, and that would be to say, okay, if we understand that these heavy metals early in life, well, what are heavy metals early in life? Well, we know today that every child that's born averages about 1,000 times more lead than was in the bones of any bones on Earth 400 years ago. So we're pretty much lead toxic. And we have the EPA saying that we have 600,000 children in America alone born with low-level mercury toxicity. So the quinton marine plasma works with the methylation support, so I don't want to confuse you. I've said that high dose of C is one way to take a lot of toxins out and to support a lot of enzymes that are not operating efficiently in your body, to give you a better environment so that you will have a tougher body. Now, what we're teaching you then is that if you take a total of 3 or 4 actual 10 cc ampules of the Quinton marine plasma, starting out with the isotonic for the first couple of weeks, and then you can go to the hypertonic. This is putting into your body ultra trace elements like rubidium and cesium, which are interesting because we do know that they help support your body's ability to remain alkaline, because we have such a disturbed diet today that most of us tend to be too acid, and trace minerals, in addition to speaking to individual genes, which the Quinton marine plasma does because of the unique ability in the ocean, you will find all the trace minerals that are no longer on the surface of the earth. We know that over time the rain washes off the topsoil, and the topsoil winds up in the ocean. The ocean will never be deficient on the good minerals, and we've been lucky enough to have a company located in Spain that has been able to get for us a reliable source of not just saline, but ultra special ocean water that is energized, and we'll get into that energy a little bit more in a moment. So this is more about the Quinton marine plasma has in it RNAs, and RNAs, this is the messenger RNA that helps one cell communicate with other cells. So in genetics, these little ampule you see in the upper right-hand corner, you have to break off the little piece of glass on one end, and then be prepared when you break it off on the other end to drink the contents if you're going to get your 3 or 4 Quinton, or put this into an atomizer that you can spray on skin that won't heal, or put into a neti pot or a syringe so you can flush out chronically ill sinuses, and hold these in your mouth like I have everybody hold the ACS silver in the mouth for at least a couple of minutes to lower the sickly, very aggressive pathogens that are in everybody's mouth. And I can say that unequivocally. Cardiologists in America today agree that most of us have some periodontal disease, and the periodontal means infection in the gums, and that this doesn't just stay in the mouth. It winds up with these infections moving into our body, and then we can find that when the person dies of a heart attack, we can take in, when we do the autopsy, the plaque will be loaded with these particular pathogens, bacteria, viral, fungal, etc., that we actually find growing in your mouth, which is why I hold ACS, advanced cellular silver, in my mouth morning and night, and I use things like Quinton, and I hold it in my mouth for a minute to replete my body for the trace minerals that you cannot get today from the soil, because no farmer is really being paid enough to go and rebalance his soil and bring these minerals back that we've washed away. But we're in a genetic talk today, and what we're concerned about now is genetically engineered foods, because we are now seeing that there's, in this book, Seeds of Deception by Jeffrey Smith, who I've interviewed at great length. He single-handedly has kept much of Europe, saved them from having to eat the tremendous intake of genetically modified foods you and I are getting. But you will see on this slide that we not only find that these genetically modified foods help increase the number of allergies in the human beings, but we even find an increased risk of animals dying, multiple health problems. And if we look at this, we can even find that this ties into number 1.8, sterility. Now, you all know in America today, it no longer seems to be enough to find a mate. We can't just go home and have babies. Today, about 40% of men don't have enough sperm, and we're going to need a reproductive specialist to give us drugs to try to make us able to have babies. So there's some interrelationships here. So it is very interesting today that the state of New York is thinking about taxing the soft drinks that are loaded with the high fructose corn syrup. And the reason they're going to tax it is they realize that we have so imbalanced our diet in America because the government, for some incredible, insane reason, subsidizes the corn by 23% so they can afford to throw corn into anything because it's so dirt cheap. And we have, of course, a lot of our soy is genetically modified. So if we look at the diet, which only those of you who actually get and watch the movie called Food Inc., will be fully aware of just how much of our diet, because when you eat a chicken, the chicken was fed nothing but these corn and soy and wheat-related foods. And, of course, if you happen to be the 30% of people in America who should never touch wheat, or the 40% of people in America who should never be on dairy because it's shortening their life, but they don't know it because they're just depressed, or they can't think, or they have high blood pressure, and they don't see that that has anything. People aren't being told ever that their high blood pressure is directly related to sensitivities, or their heart starts skipping beats, as is described by Dr. Coco in a $7 book that you can buy called The Pulse Test. He just happens to be chief of allergy at Columbia University Medical School. But no cardiologist is going to tell you to stop eating the food that's making your heart skip. They're going to give you drugs, or a pacemaker, or give you Coumadin, which will permanently shorten your lifespan. They don't treat causes in America. There's no money in treating causes. So that's why we have to have you learn all these things. So we know that there are more toxic reactions, and we know that it's so hard today to be sure that the food you're eating isn't causing your blood sugar to be up at 200, and that you would have no diabetes if you just ate foods that didn't have a problem with your body handling them. So we now sit there and say, well, okay, I can't figure this all out. It's too complicated, Dr. Gordon. I just can't do it. Well, so Dr. Younger is a really nice doctor in New York City, and he says, look at folks, I can give you a diet, and he says you won't have to be having the problem with extra pounds and indigestion and restless nights and itchy skin and depression and anxiety and chronic allergies or recurrence. He says, I can help you. And so obviously when we help you, we're going to take you away from eating the main things that run our whole diet today, which, of course, again, are corn, soy, and wheat. And because that's what we feed to the cow, when you eat it, isn't the cow that our forefathers ate, because the meat of the cow doesn't give you the same mix of what we call omega-3 to omega-6. These are the kinds of oils, and we're eating the wrong foods. It pushes your body into inflammation. So he's going to recommend that you do some things. So Dr. Jack Shellam is a friend of mine, and he's done a good job trying to explain to you here that we can absolutely find a way to feed your genes, and that all of us are suffering a mismatch between our Stone Age diet that we were designed to eat and the foods that we are all getting today. And so this is the next slide is going to show you that a good friend of mine, Peter Tiadamo, is quite famous for having written a book called Eat Right for Your Genes. Now, this has caused a lot of stir. A lot of people think that he was full of hot air, but when we did a little study, and it's not definitive, it was just 5,000 charts of deceased patients in a Florida hospital. But when we took and opened those charts, it was interesting to find that all we wanted to do is we opened the chart and said what blood group was this person who's dead, and what age was this patient when they died. And there was quite a revealing study, because when we did it, it turned out that the O's were living a little bit longer than the A's. The difference was the A's average age and death in that little study was in the low 60s, and the O's was in the high 70s. So we know that there is something about the fact that you could be living a long, long time if you live in Japan, and you could be blood group A because they have a lot of blood group A people, but their diet doesn't give them this same huge intake of corn and wheat and this ridiculous levels of beef that we live. They have beef a little bit more expensive. It's a little bit better fed beef, but they're going to use it more as a condiment. They're not going to shove down the steaks and the hamburgers that we do. So if we look then that there is definitely something, and we're all going to struggle yet for a while, no one has it all completely put together, as to which is the right diet for which type. But we do know that without any question, the American diet is not working for us. Now then, I want to make it very clear that we will be able to help with the right kind of supplements, and we can really make a big change for you. Now, Dr. Jasper Ryan is at the University of California in Berkeley at the Ames Research Laboratory. Bruce Ames, Ph.D., is one of our leading scientists in the world. And he is the one that invented the Ames test to determine which things cause mutagenicity or cancer. And so he's very famous, and he also has been nice enough to realize that we are all so different that we can justify the fact that some of you will never have optimal health unless you take more B6 than any of your neighbors would ever dream of taking, or you might need much more of some other nutrient, be it vitamin D or be it one of the other B vitamins. We find that our problem is that we're trying to treat everybody as though we're the same, and we're not. So the dream is, will we be able to get a personal genetic profile that will protect you from doctors who don't give a darn and simply want you in and out of the office in 7 minutes, and they want to write a prescription? And after all, that's part of the game, because the whole system, if we do this health care plan that they're talking about doing, is going to push everybody into the same kind of standardized health care, and that's going directly away from what the evidence is. The evidence is that we are all quite different, and to tease out which person needs to be off of a particular food. I had a patient of mine whose blood pressure suddenly went to 160 over 240. Now, if he sees a typical internist, he's going to be put on the most toxic, frightening drugs that will guarantee to shorten your life, but an internist doesn't know what else to do. I just told the patient, hey, I'm sorry, Phil, I've known you for a long time. Let's just do what I tell you to do. The next 4 days, you live on nothing but water. And by the end of the fourth day, his pressure was down to about 150 over 90. And then he said, well, this is great, Doc, but I can't live on water forever. I said, then we're going to put you on foods that you've never eaten before, because obviously there's some food your genes are not going to allow you to handle. And as we went through it, we kept his blood pressure down. I said very simple, if it's a food, papaya, watermelon, broccoli, rutabaga, I don't care. If it's a food you haven't eaten in 4 to 6 months, please have it, because the chance that it'll be bad for you is extremely remote. So he stayed on that way for a while, and finally he got hungry for his old diet, and now he's not on any blood pressure pills. His blood pressure is 120 over 8, and he went back and he ate a potato with the skin, and immediately, within an hour, his blood pressure started to go right out of the sky again. So now he had used common sense to learn what he had. So what we're teaching you here is that it is front page news that University of California, Berkeley has proven that some of the epigenetic changes that I showed you lead to the epidemic of obesity and diabetes. We mentioned that was Randy Jourl. We said that that's the PBS documentary that's called The Nova, and that was Ghost in Your Genes, a very powerful film that you need to see. But what we're telling you is that we repaired it, so that, remember, what I'm saying is that if I didn't repair it, every single mouse that is the offspring of that yellow mouse would for all time be yellow and diabetic and obese. But if I repair it using these methylating substances, which is why they're in the bioenergy C and they are in the sublingual beyond B12, because I understand the need of all of us to try to go back and undo the problems that we have done, because the expression of our genes has been modified by these totally unhealthy that we call the American diet. So yes, the day will come that we will be able to tell you exactly which supplement you need. We're not there yet. I have done very expensive genetic testing on a lot of children with autism, and we learn from that some useful information. It, at this point in time, is still not what I would consider adequately cost-effective, but I am very optimistic that the price is going to come. As I said, to do your total genes would be $10,000 a day. It's going to drop to $1,000. Everything is going to change. So the day will come that we'll be able to say, okay, based on your genetic testing, you need to have a diet that excludes this food and includes that one. But we'll do pretty well. When I get through the rest of these slides, you'll be able to see that there's some good news here. So we want to talk now about folic acid, because everybody, I hope by now, knows that the March of Dimes switched after the polio seemed to be under control over to birth defects, and they really helped educate people that if you think you're going to have a baby, if you even are thinking about possibly having a baby, you've got to be on folic acid. The problem is, of course, they don't want to have to push the fact that one folic acid has been selling for $15,000 a kilogram. That would be the one from Merck of Germany. That's the one that is somehow, the University of Arkansas designed it, but somehow the rights were bought by a drug company, and the natural folic acid we all need has been priced a little prohibitively. Hopefully that's about to end. But in any event, what we're saying here is that folic acid is a big story. But we are talking here about schizophrenia, and when you read all the things that I write, we teach you that even a mother just getting a bad flu during pregnancy significantly increases the number of schizophrenia cases. So wait a minute. But here I'm talking about folic acid and schizophrenia. That's the point of bringing this up. I'm saying to all of you that my F.I.G.H.T program is to teach you that everything is multifactorial. So it would be nice for you to know that I covered infection last week, but how am I going to keep a pregnant woman from getting a flu? Well, she might have to learn how much seed to take. She may have to have some silver kept in her house. There's a lot of tricks because I teach infection control, and I've written a great deal about it, but I'm trying to put all these pieces in your mind so that you understand that we have a tremendous epidemic now. They're saying that in the last 12 years, the number of children who are diagnosed with asthma or obesity or ADHD, learning disorders, autism, etc., the number of children has gone from roughly 12% to roughly 25% in 12 years. So, folks, that's 1 out of 4 children today have a diagnosable significant health problem. Obviously, then it's my intention to have all of you understand that, yeah, green leafy vegetables are rich in the real folic acid. You're not going to get them, even as much as happy as I am that Longevity Plus has the very best possible approach to maintaining health for most people. It's called BCI. It's 9 pills because it gives you the omega-3 that everyone needs. And it gives you a primrose that you can't take omega-3 without primrose if you want the total benefit. But it also gives you 3 of the strongest multiple that money can buy, and that multiple, by the way, has shown that a good multiple will do more than a statin to improve your lipid metabolism. But nobody tells you that. So because the entire system is out of control, the drug companies own Congress, the net result is they'll pay for your statin, even if it's $100+ a month. Obviously, you understand that most drugs cost less than $2 to turn out. That gives them $98 to play with, and that's why we have the best Congress that money can buy. But try to understand that what we're saying here is that the good multiple vitamin that is in the BCI, which you really must be on because it gives you a chance of fighting back against many of these factors that I list in F.I.G.H.T. Nonetheless, due to cost, we are not putting at this time that natural form of folic acid in that product. You have to buy it separately in the sublingual Beyond B12. Sorry to make it that way, but reality is that I can't do everything that I want to do for people because if I throw everything in there, the price becomes prohibitive. And right now, remember, I have virtually no known fatal heart attacks in almost 20 years in anybody lucky enough to know about BCI and take the 9 pills twice a day. So I'm pretty proud that we have actually eliminated the need for bypass and stenting and all these things. It's such a shame that the leaders in our country are unaware of that because our former president doesn't look very well. They just stented him. It's amazing. They put a stent in President Bill Clinton the day after the Wall Street Journal had a huge full-page article about how useless stents have been shown to be. And New York Times has shown how useless bypass is, but they don't learn any of this. All of the information is on my website. There isn't anybody with a heart condition that I can't do better than anybody using drugs and surgery. We can make them look like they never started. So our problem here is that these are expensive, and taking all these things, I feel bad because it's expensive. So that's why we're going to get into the rest of this presentation, because there's some cost-effective things we can all be doing coming up here rapidly. So what I'm going to show you now is that a poor diet is actually what the standard American diet is. And so when people think they're eating right, unless we get away from all fried, all microwaved, etc. Unless we get some organic foods, we are not eating well. So the picture then is very simple. We have to realize that there are specific family traits tying into disorder and depression, but what I want you to know is that we have no problem with these things because it shows you in the last part of this that folic acid can overcome this. So let's remember, March of Dimes is not going to tell people to take expensive folic acid. Any folic acid for youngsters who are younger women having babies is enough to actually cut down the amount of birth defects, and we're very happy about that relationship. The problem is that I am already 75, and I plan to live to 125, so if I'm going to live another 50 years, I'm going to be on folic acid every day, and when I'm older, I don't have the latitude to get the full benefit from less than the correct molecule, so I'm having to take the sublingual B12, and so many people's life would be different if you were on it, because we need B12 for many, many, many reasons. And your doctors, when they measure it in the blood, they don't know what they're doing. It has to be methylmalonic acid testing, and the blood test is not telling them what they thought, and they'll often tell you don't need it, and it really means you need it more. And we've tried to teach you that vitamin C is not a vitamin. It's an essential nutrient, so please understand the cost of staying alive today with optimal health is high, because I wouldn't have anybody try to live without at least one slightly heaping teaspoon of bioenergy C morning and night, because it is critical to get at least 8,000 milligrams, because as it spills out of your body, it's provably carrying toxins out. But only this book tells you how corrupt the whole system is, because they're telling everybody that you can, the amount of vitamin C they need is so small that it is on purpose keeping people ill. And so this is why I'm sad about this. And the fact that you have 1,200 references in the bottom of this book tells you that whether you think you're afraid to go without vaccines because your child might get whooping cough, and they try to keep everybody in a state of fear, try to understand that the vaccine situation is out of control. But if you have vitamin C at home or you have silver at home, we can keep you from getting sick. The problem will be that we have to educate our neighbors, because they'll say they don't want their child playing with your child because you weren't vaccinated. So there's a lot of area in here in which you're going to need to spend time on Gordon research and watch webinar after webinar, because even though it may say it's the webinar on vitamin C and cancer, I recommend you watch it even if you don't have cancer, because technically everybody has cancer. And by the way, just to tell you, vitamins, the latest facts are that cancer is now the leading cause of death in the United States. It finally is pulled ahead of heart disease. So, of course, I've talked to you all about the need for the right kind of vitamin C, bioenergy C, and I said that it is giving you electrons, and electrons give you energy to solve things, so you don't get a hot tooth that has to be pulled out or a hot ear that needs to be split. Yeah, vitamin C is giving energy to your body to solve issues, but it is always being beaten up by the toxins, which I repeat, if you go and watch 10 Americans video on Google, put in the word 10 Americans, click on video, watch it, you will never again wonder why I have everybody on some form of zeolite, starting with the ACZ and then going to the Zeo Gold, because that can start the process of detoxifying 2 or 3 bottles of the ACZ. But you always are going to need the silver, because we all have pathogens like cytomegalic virus and chlamydia and Coxsackie, which I've covered last week. So this is the vitamin C. Vitamin D, actually, getting back to genetics, helps control the MS gene. But I have vitamin D clearly stopping asthma in children, but taking very large quantities. That's why we need people like Dr. Bruce Ames with the laboratory in Berkeley that is showing that you can overcome some of these epigenetic effects with the right nutrients. But Dr. Ames is a world-class scientist that can teach you that there are many conditions in which we have suboptimal health. I don't care if you're talking recurrent kidney stones, which often just need higher doses of B6 and magnesium, but with every condition there's research. I don't care if you're talking bladder cancer. Again, you will find genes that will need that in order to express them properly, you're going to need higher than usual quantities of certain nutrients, and your doctors don't know that, and they just tell you you're wasting your money at the health food store because they don't learn this. So Eric Madrid is an ACAM doctor who's written a book to make sure that nobody gets you confused because it's so important in MS and heart disease and cancer. Which alone, breast cancer would be 68% less breast cancer if we took this. And if you were lucky enough to get the H.R.T., the herbal remedy from Thailand that is available only through Longevity Plus, then you are also getting something that will stop the hot flashes, the bone loss, the vaginal dryness, the the poor sleep, the depression, etc. Stop that while at the same time helping prevent breast cancer. So between HRT, herbal remedy from Thailand, and vitamin D, we should really see a big change, but we still want to have optimal health. So let's go back briefly. Genes are things that are a little confusing, and even if your doctor wears a stethoscope, it doesn't mean he really has read these books. And here's a guy, Matt Ridley, that's a really good author, and these are books that you may want to look at. And here's his newer one, What Makes Us Human, the Genes. And so this is endorsed by Jerome Groopman. This book by Jerome Groopman happens to be the top doctor at Harvard Medical School. He was the head of internal medicine, and he's written a book, How Doctors Think. Now, that book would depress you because he says that within approximately 6 seconds of the time you walk into the consultation room to see the doctor, he has stopped listening to what you say. He's already deciding how to get you out of the room and give you a prescription. That's How Doctors Think, a book by this Jerome Groopman. But he's telling you that this is a worthwhile book for you to know because we're going to have to defend ourselves against a lot of nonsense when we still have doctors, well-meaning doctors, going along with removal of both breasts because somebody's mom had breast cancer and they were tested. I mean, we did the same thing in America. We actually had a young lady, couple of them, two of them, sisters. Their mom had gastric carcinoma. They tested, she had the gene for it. They tested the youngsters, they were 18, 20, and they had the gene for it, and they put them through all the tests, and very extensive tests, thousands and thousands. They had to put a tube down them, every possible test. And they said, gee, we don't have any, there's no stomach cancer now. They said, we'll see you next week, and they said, next year. And they said, what do you mean? What am I back? And they said, well, you carry the gene. We'll just have to watch you till you finally have that gastric cancer. And so we'll see you every year. And the girl said, we're not living this way. Take our stomachs out. They took the stomachs out, and under the microscope, both of the stomachs clearly showed that the cancer was there, but it was below the level of detection even when they had the tube down the throat and they were scraping the stomach. So my point is this. We all have cancer. But these slides that I'm giving you are to try to take you into another exciting age, because I want to move you beyond that, because they didn't need to have their stomachs out, and the women are not needing to have their breasts removed. They need to read A World Without Cancer on my website by Kobayashi, who is a top oncologist, pathologist, molecular biologist. That's Kobayashi, and he practices in Japan, and he has been funded by a church, and he has the data to tie all this together, because the program was very simple. Lower the stress, simplify the diet, do the detoxification, do some saunas, get on the right kind of immune support products we have immunity to. So across the board, we can handle these issues without this problem of cutting parts of our body off because we're frightened about our genes. So these books are to make sure that you know what the genes are all about. And this is a very bright gentleman by Dr. Goswami, and you will find that there is some very exciting hope in books like this. And when you go to this gentleman, Dr. Bruce Lipton used to teach at the University of Wisconsin Medical School. I'm originally from Madison, Wisconsin, so I have respect for the school, and I listened to Bruce Lipton, and he's changed my life, and he may change your life, because he is such a top molecular biologist that he's been able to show that your doctors don't know what they're talking about. When he asks a doctor a simple question, doctor, if I take the nucleus out of a cell, what happens? And the doctor would assume that it's the same as taking the brain out of a frog. Death would occur instantly. It turns out that's not what happens at all, because it turns out that the actual brain of your cell is not in the nucleus at all. It's in the membrane of the cell, which is, of course, why it's so important that you get on omega-3 every day, because the omega-3, by the way, omega-3 is part of the answer. Also, we don't want to continue the stupid attack on cholesterol, because cholesterol in your body is the building block for the membrane. So we don't like statins very much at all. We like you to be on natural products, but we need to look at his book. His book will take you down the pathway of knowing that there are receptors on those membranes, and that your thoughts and a magnetic field that you can, and even acupuncture and microelectric current, you're going to learn that we have hope, that if we did some meditation, some yoga, that we can actually bathe the membrane, because every membrane of every cell is loaded with receptors, and those receptors are waiting to get the juices of positive things from you. To make it understandable, they actually now have What the Bleep is available through any of the large stores. You can buy it. This video will bring you into more knowledge than 99% of the doctors you're seeing. And I'm making such a big case out of it because many of you have loved ones who are being told they must have heart surgery tomorrow. Nonsense. If they show a 98% blockage on a blood vessel, it doesn't mean that they need surgery. A PET scan will often find that it already has collateral circulation. The medicine is out of control today, and I have to help you understand that. But this is one way of you fighting back, as you'll see here, the stuff that we used to call, we make fun of it, we call it touchy-feely, when you learn how to think positively or focus, all this stuff that, we all want a pill that we can swallow or a quick surgery. We want to go back to our old lifestyle. That's not it. This is kind of different. So here is a book that I think you will one day want to own. Because he says that now that cancer is leading heart disease, and I've already told you that heart disease is no problem for you because you already know where to get beyond chelation improved, and since I haven't had anybody die, to my knowledge, of a fatal heart attack in over 20 years or even a stroke, then so heart disease is not the thing. So if we're going to live a long, healthy life, let's learn from this book. Now, what he's telling you in this book is that he found out quite by accident, because he's a researcher in neurobiology. He's an MD, Ph.D. He's now a professor at the medical school of psychiatry. He was doing this study, and the subject didn't show up, and so he put himself into the CAT scan, and he learned 16, 17 years ago that he had a brain tumor, cancer of the brain. So that was a complete shock. He had no idea. Well, that's happening to a lot of people today. So in his book, this MD PhD has been able to identify for you some very positive things. What he did, for example, is he really started to identify which foods actually have research, like turmeric, the curry that is eaten by a lot of people in India, that yellow, that's a tremendous anti-cancer, anti-inflammatory. Well, he then wanted to find each food that would definitely benefit you, and which foods you better stop touching. And I keep being hard on people, just taking them off dairy and taking them off wheat. Well, his book's a lot tougher than that, but he took a friend of his, had developed inoperable, rapidly growing pancreatic cancer with an expected lifespan of about 4 months. He covers all this in the book. He actually went and lived in the library and found references that are all in his book. I love this guy. The references are there. So this is all hard science. And he told us, and he put a list of foods together, and his friend lived over 4.5 years. Now, the doctor with his brain tumor should be gone quite a few years ago. It's now 17 years. So he's actually been on a learning curve here, and he's sharing it with all of us. But what I like, and I think this is the powerful sentence that I want to put in you, is I like this idea that with the BRCA women, that before the World War II, the women who had this gene, they only had about 1/3 the level of breast cancer that we see in the granddaughters today. So we're now in the fast food era. Of course, there's more pollution. There's more lead and mercury in the sky and all the things that I talk about. But these genes that cause these women to have both breasts removed, these are not cancer genes at all. These are the key words. Those genes are just fast food intolerant genes. And the same will be true of other lifestyle choices, such as refusing to exercise or doing nothing about your stress. In other words, the genes that we call BRCA genes are just genes that say you're going to have to handle stress better. You're going to actually have to plug exercise into your lifestyle. You're going to have to eat different than the SAD, Standard American Diet. So the statistics on cancer survival are nonsense because they don't show the difference between people who are sucked into the system because it's paid for by some insurance company. They're going to go ahead and have chemo, they're going to have radiation, and they're going to put their life in the hand of somebody else rather than accepting any responsibility at all for changing anything because, as he says, Dr. David Servan-Schreiber, he said it was a wake-up call. It was one of the best things that happened to me. He changed so many things about his life when the bad news he hit. But other people go right on smoking. We all know them. They absolutely are not going to lower the exposure to other cancer. They're going to stay on a Western diet. The Western diet is nothing but a fertilizer to feed cancer. Now, they can actually take your blood out of your body, and they can put it in a tube, and then they can put into that tube actual cancer cells to see will your blood do anything to deal with cancer. And they can show that when you eat everything right, your blood becomes a voracious appetite for cancer cells, and you do everything wrong, it does nothing. It's the same thing that we call the phagocytic index that I did with Dr. Emanuel Sharaskian 50 years ago. We just did the same test. We actually took your blood, and we took it in a tube, and we added some bacteria to find out how many bacteria will your white cells eat. And if you've been living on sugar that day, and you know everybody today is getting 120 pounds of sugar excepting myself, so that means you're getting 240 pounds. You're probably eating my sugar for me. But the sugar paralyzed the cells. So now we have the fast food diet paralyzing your ability to deal with cancer. Then you have to deal with the emotions, and this book is a wonderful job of trying to bring all of this into your consciousness. And then there is another book that goes even a little further. This book may be the single biggest breakthrough to empower you to take control, because after all, everything that I talk about, unfortunately, means you're spending money buying the C, buying the inoculation, buying the right kind of B12 and getting the D and all that stuff. It's nice to know that this book starts out with Dawson Church giving a lecture to a group of people, and a woman stands up and says, you know, that's nice, all that stuff you said about positive thinking and meditation. It's really interesting. She said, but she says, I'm here because I'm in pain. I'm living on pain pills. My shoulder is frozen. I can't move my arm more than an inch or two in any direction. So as luck would have it, he was able in front of the audience to ask her some key questions, and it turned out that she had had some very unfortunate death in her son, and that their way that it had been handled by the military was kind of sad. In any event, he was able to put one and one together, and he was able to see how that emotional trigger actually helped lead to that frozen shoulder, total inability to use that arm. And within less than 15 minutes, he had her swinging the arm above her head as he helped her deal with these issues. So that, yes, we have a little device called the alpha stem. Various people have used electricity over the microelectric currents, help our body talk to various cells. And so this is part of energy medicine. And we have actually a study just completed that depression in pregnant women is tremendously improved with things called acupuncture. But here's a book that I have used. It's a big expense for you. Below $16, but I tell you that this book had pictures that were good enough that I have used things like this to take a patient who had an acute appendix ready to rupture, whose abdomen was a solid board. He couldn't be moved. The pain was intense. And I took the points in this, and I held my finger over this point. So when I was on the point, it was quite painful for the patient, but I was not touching the belly that was hurting. I was touching things on the fingers and the toes and the legs. But when I went from point to point, within 20 minutes, the patient was entirely pain-free. So I'm trying to make it clear. All of this fits into this new thinking about how does it all work. It's really exciting. We live in a day of new physics. And the things that I teach are things that I am passionate about because I've been the director of a laboratory. I've done 100,000 people's hair and blood mineral tests. I know how these toxins do relate. But I want to give you a lot of hope because the more that we can do with positive thinking, improving our focus, doing meditation, the better it is going to be because beyond chelation, these 9 pills, I'm very proud of these. The 3 yellow tablets are the strongest multiple money can buy, and they have in them a little cesium and rubidium, but you get much more, and you take quinton marine plasma to get those advanced minerals that only come from the ocean. The 3 on the right-hand side are essential daily defense. You can buy that by itself. You can open one of these little capsules on the right, essential daily defense. You can put that in the applesauce of any child that weighs 20 pounds, and you can start detoxing everybody on earth with the garlic methionine. So the EDD is in the 9 pills because it's a chelator, and I like to admit that when I take the lead out of you, I'd like a yellow pill to go in to replace because you might lose a little zinc when you take the lead out. One of these capsules is Primrose. One of these capsules is omega-3. They're both critical to your health. So those are the 9 pills. These are the websites. And I repeat that if you want to talk to somebody back and forth by email, go to the F.I.G.H.T blog and understand that I have the whole site to try to teach you what zeolite is all about. And if you learn how to use my website at the current time, it says, very simple, you can click on conditions, or you can click on presentations, and you will find all of my PowerPoints, all of my webinars, everything is there. So I'd like at this time to see if we can have an answer to a question. Do we have a way to deal with HPV infection? And will it come? Okay, a protocol to rid the body of HPV. Any infection, whether it's HIV, which I have tremendous experience, all infections I've ever treated, always respond to all my tricks. Now, I've tried to cover an infection protocol on my website, but that infection protocol, remember, it's going to be based on the silver, but it's always going to be to teach people that as long as you keep eating that wheat that you're sensitive to or that dairy, your body is wasting a whole lot of its energy, that instead of keeping the herpes virus or the other infections that we all carry under control, it's wasting a lot of time because you're making a mistake. So the answer is this. I have never had to ever have any problem on every infection if the patient understood that when they get under too much stress, which is hard to avoid, they're going to have to amplify and go back to an active 3, 4, 5 day ramp up, taking a larger dose of silver, 4 or 5 days of high dose of vitamin A, as high as 500,000 units of A for 3, 4, 5 days. They can't ever go off the D. They're going to have to use the immunity products. If they're chronically getting sick all the time, they take the immunity pills. It's called Immunity 2 for acute infection, Immunity 3 for the chronic. They're going to have to use those long term, but when they think something is coming back, to ramp way up on them. So yes, we will be exposed to stress. You will find times, I mean, if I put somebody, for example, in the Hippocrates Institute in Florida, and I have you locked up there where you can only get organic food, it's all raw, people with serious diseases, they get well, but when they go back to their home, it's kind of hard to raise the wheatgrass. It's kind of hard to do everything. They get stressed out. So yes, no matter what we do, it's likely that things will come back. But once you've gotten rid of your tumor one time, it's not that hard to get rid of it a second time just because you got stressed out and thought that because you'd been 10 years since your breast cancer last showed up that you could go back to living like others. You cannot. Once you've had a cancer and we put it into remission, please understand that cancer is not gone. It's just waiting, lying dormant. It's waiting to attack you again because that cancer was your wake-up call to simply tell you that you do not have fast food intolerant genes. You actually have fast food. You have genes that are going to make bad things happen if you fall off the program. The next is a question from a gentleman in Tucson. gets bronchitis, turns into pneumonia, takes lots of supplements, and had pneumonia twice. So across the board, the lungs are getting weak and they have scars. So anytime, if it's chronic obstructive lung disease, bronchitis, emphysema, I don't care. As I said, cystic fibrosis, I don't care what the disease is, you want to use Quinton marine plasma. Those ampules, those 10 cc glass ampules, you want to be on at least a total of 3 to 4 of those glass ampules taken by mouth. You break the little glass thing off, and you drink it, suck it out of the thing, and you take them intermittently throughout the day. You start out mainly taking the isotonic, and then after you've been on that for a month, then you can go half isotonic, half hypertonic. Taking the hypertonic late in the day is fine. But I want you to get a high-quality inhaler, and these are able then to put into the inhaler a little of this Quinton marine plasma so that these lungs get bathed in this healing RNA multi-mineral material that we have from the ocean that has saved the lives of children 100 years ago, that we have pictures of children who were near death. And so we do know that we can do a lot by helping your body's genes develop better. But across the board, I have been able to take anybody who got recurrent colds and infections going into pneumonia. You have to listen to each step. Keep at home always a bottle of Nutrisorb A so that 1 drop is 10,000, and you're going to take 50 drops a day as an adult. That would 500,000 units of vitamin A a day for 3, 4, 5 days. And that is going to give about 1% of the people a slight headache. For a couple of days, it'll stop. You're going to never go off the vitamin D. You're going to have always in the house the silver. Remember, silver could be taken away from us because they've already banned it in Europe, because obviously the drug companies don't like something. Remember, we lose 100,000 lives each year in America in hospital with antibiotic-resistant infections, and I state unequivocally that 90% of those would not die if you could simply put in my silver, my high-dose A, the D, and the rest of the tricks I'm teaching you here. So that just because it's antibiotic-resistant doesn't mean anything, because there's nothing that's resistant to ACZ. Since they're going to take it away from us pretty likely one day, because they can't have something that really works available to the masses. So just assume that you know that's going to have the silver has never been known to turn bad, but you can assume a shelf life of 5 years. Keep silver in your house. If you're always getting these infections, remember, immunity has been greatly enhanced in anybody using, I have the strongest immune support products you can buy. Immunity 2 is more for the acute infection, so you've got to have a bottle of that in the refrigerator and take Immunity 2 when you get the acute infection, and then stay on Immunity 3, which I have every cancer patient taking 3 of these twice a day across in all year long. So that is the answer to the patient. Now the next patient, then, always understand that if you are unfortunate enough to not have learned which foods you need to eliminate, that's why you need to go and listen to my F.I.G.H.T program. And listen to when I started out this presentation today, I said the first thing is a HEPA filter that was being put in the bedroom. I tried to cover it because we have all the answers. We have useful tools. The silver is a great tool, the A, the immunity, and taking vitamin D every day and having it there, because you always go high on the vitamin D when you think you're coming down with something. Next person has a more concern about an immune disorder, and vitamin C increases lymphocytes and white blood cells we have too many of. Do you still use big doses of C? Yes. As an expert at vitamin C, I have never seen a condition that I was not going to use higher doses, even though some people will tell you if you have iron overload that you can't take C because it's going to increase the uptake in your body of vitamins, of iron. Across the board, if you have an immune disorder, try to remember. Let's start with lupus. It's so easy to treat. All these things. Always understand the fight came out of autoimmune. So buy the book, The Autoimmune Epidemic. Understand it lists 100 diseases. If you come down and if the immune disorders was, let's say they call it lupus, then everybody wants a magic bullet. Yes, I have magic bullets. Take more DHEA. If a woman can have 25 milligrams of DHEA, takes no prescription, a man can have 50 milligrams. Everybody listening to the sound of my voice has got to realize, because they have wrecked our internal flora you're going to buy acidophilus every day. I don't care if you buy the cheapest one, PB8, or Chiodophilus, or the most expensive ones for $100. You're going to be on A acidophilus every day the rest of your life. And you're going to feed the acidophilus so that it loves you by giving the Beyond Fiber, which forms a lattice work inside your intestine that the good guys can fight against the bad guys, because everybody living in America today has bad guys in your intestinal flora that's helping drag you down. Now, you can get the book by Mark Hyman. Study Mark Hyman. Now, go on the website. Use his name. He's got tons of stuff you can watch free of charge. So across the board, what we try to teach everybody is an immune disorder is always, we want a simple answer, but always you need the total program. The total program is too expensive. So that's why today I recommend that you buy a book. If you're going to select one book, it's going to have to be the anti-cancer, the book, A New Way of Life by Survey and Schreiber, because if I give you the one, the genie in your genes, it may be over your head and you want something practical to deal with your immune disorder, but always understand that the book Autoimmune Epidemic tells you that 27 million Americans have a genetic issue that they don't handle toxins. They can't handle the level of mercury, like we showed you. David Ewan Duncan doesn't get rid of mercury. So that across the board, you're going to have to be on zeolite. You're going to have to sweat. You're going to have to learn the exercise. You're going to have to learn everything. The next one says, I've been told to be careful using immune enhancers due to MS diagnosis. Do I recommend immunity to treat MS, and how? Please feel free to talk to Longevity Plus customer service staff. They are empowered to look at the F.A.G.H.T, the Forum on Anti-Aging and Chelation Therapy, F.A.G.H.T. There they have a 10-page document that I have written of a protocol how to treat MS. I have never found MS that I couldn't treat. Recently, we took and had a young man who over 20 years had gone from age 20 to age 40, and during that time, he had started out with this kind of blindness problems, the eyes, and he'd gotten up in a wheelchair, and he simply utilized the Beyond Chelation Improved, the Bioenergy C, which he learned to keep it in the yellow on this little stick instead of the green, and he wound up using the high dose, and then he started really aggressively working up on the zeolite, starting with the ACZ and ACS, and then after about 3-4 bottles, he went into the Zeo Gold. In the Zeo Gold, he wound up needing 3, 4, 5 a day, which gave him some pretty good explosive diarrhea for the first 2-3 months, and a lot of stuff came out, and but the bottom line is, in less than 60 days, he was able to drive the car again. So I love treating MS. The 10-page protocol, the customer support, you can talk to them. They can download it and send it to you because it was written for my doctors. I have over 2,000 doctors I talk to daily by email, and I give them my experience from practicing medicine over 50 years and having gotten my own health back by going to every meeting on every subject on virtually every continent. I share all these tricks. So MS is easy, and by all means, understand it's always get the bad stuff out, put the good stuff in, and yes, immunity is a part of the situation, but always know that every MS patient has got undiagnosed food sensitivities, and you've got to be on the vitamin D. I've written about it. So trick is that if you go to a doctor and he joins at no cost, and if he likes you, he says, oh, who's this crazy Gordon? Okay, I'll join. I'll go to his website. I can join at no cost, and I can become a member of F.I.G.H.T. I can put in the word MS or multiple sclerosis, and I can find everything that's been said. Because remember, I've been typing for 5 years, and my thousands of doctors contribute. So there's a lot of posts that can be read, and anybody can be an authority on any disease by becoming a member of F.I.G.H.T. Now, I'm trying to make that easy for you, the public, by letting you go to fightforyourhealth.com. Eventually, it will grow and grow because it's obviously I have built an entire free medical school of advanced medicine is what I offer people when they go to my F.I.G.H.T. forum, but so the doctors are comfortable talking to each other. It's for the health professionals only, those 2,000 lucky people, but we're going to start to build it for you, the public, to go to fightforyourhealth.com. There's already a lot there. And I repeat, go to the limebook.com/fight and join. And type in and say, hi, I've just heard of this thing. I've got MS. Anybody out there? And you'll be getting feedback from people who know all about MS because, as I said, the lady that runs the blog has fought cancer and MS to a standstill. So please take advantage of how to learn how to use all of the product. It's been a pleasure talking to you, all of you, and this is Dr. Gary Gordon finishing the webinar on genetics. We'll be back next week on heavy metals. The week after that, we'll do hormones. The week after that will be toxins. I thank you for your attention and interest, and please be in optimal health to enjoy your maximum useful intended lifespan. Thank you, and I'm signing off. Dr. Gordon here.
Thank you, Dr. Gordon. The products that Dr. Gordon has formulated are available through Longevity Plus. Please call 800-580-7587 to place your order.